They do this dance and Mark Antony's like, go put your hands on your mother's hips.
These accusations that Brooklyn has now put out publicly, they're so specific about the wedding dress being hijacked last minute, about his mother supposedly jumping in on his first dance and acting inappropriately.
The Beckham family drama continues to escalate after firstborn son Brooklyn Beckham blasted his famous parents, David and Victoria, in a long and emotional Instagram message.
Have you ever seen a wedding moment so awkward, so unexpected, that years later, people are still whispering about it? Because what happened during Brooklyn Beckham's wedding dance is now being looked at in a completely different light. At the time, guests thought it was just a strange interruption, a confusing moment on stage, a dance that didn't go the way anyone expected. But now, with fresh statements, eyewitness perspectives, and online speculation exploding again, that same moment is being re-examined like a scene from a drama nobody realized they were watching in real time. Why did the music stop feeling romantic and start feeling uncomfortable? Why did people close to the stage say Brooklyn and Nicola looked visibly uneasy? And why is DJ Fat Tony's perspective suddenly getting so much attention? What once looked like a harmless wedding memory is now being discussed as a symbol of deeper family tension, blurred boundaries, and a fallout that didn't start after the wedding, but may have been exposed during it. This isn't just about a dance. It's about what that moment represented. And why people are now asking, was that the night everything quietly changed for the Beckham family? The more people revisit that wedding night, the more that single moment starts to feel less like an awkward interruption and more like a window into something much bigger that had been building for years. Because here's what makes this story so unusual. This wasn't just any wedding. This was the wedding of the Beckham family's firstborn son. Cameras weren't officially rolling, but make no mistake, this was a room filled with celebrities, industry insiders, lifelong friends, and people who had watched this family's image be carefully crafted for decades. Every detail of that night had been planned to perfection. The flowers, the seating, the music cues, the timing of every entrance. Nothing was random. And that's why the dance moment stands out so sharply in people's memories. Guests expected to see Brooklyn and Nicola share a romantic first dance, the classic newlywed moment everyone waits for. The lights were right. The music was ready. The crowd's attention was fixed on the stage. But instead of the expected scene, something happened that instantly shifted the energy in the room. People close to the stage would later describe the mood changing from celebration to confusion in seconds. Smiles turned into puzzled looks. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. And more than anything, eyes started moving back and forth between Brooklyn, Nicola, and Victoria, trying to understand what they were watching unfold. It wasn't loud. It wasn't chaotic. It was subtle, but deeply noticeable. And those subtle moments are the ones that stick. According to accounts from attendees, Brooklyn didn't look relaxed. Nicola didn't look like she knew where to stand. And Victoria, unexpectedly at the center of what was meant to be the couple's moment, became the focus of the entire room. At the time, most people brushed it off as a spontaneous family moment. A mother celebrating her son. A slight mix-up in timing. Nothing more. But hindsight has a strange way of changing how memories are viewed. Because now, after public statements, interviews, and growing discussion online, people are going back to that exact moment and asking a different question. Was that really just a misunderstanding? Or was it a glimpse into long-simmering tension that few outsiders knew about? The reason this question carries so much weight is because, even before the wedding, there had already been whispers of strain between Brooklyn, Nicola, and parts of the Beckham family. Nothing confirmed. Nothing dramatic. Just quiet rumors that something felt off behind the scenes. The wedding dress situation had already raised eyebrows. Nicola ultimately wore Valentino instead of a Victoria Beckham design. And while the public explanation sounded simple, it left people wondering why plans had changed so close to the big day. Then there were seating arrangements that reportedly caused tension. Then private disagreements that never made headlines. And then, the dance. Suddenly, all those small, disconnected moments began to feel connected. People started remembering how quickly Brooklyn and Nicola slipped away from the spotlight after the wedding. How rarely they appeared with the family afterward. How carefully worded interviews became. How certain topics were avoided completely. It didn't look like a dramatic fallout. It looked like distance. Quiet, deliberate distance. And that's where DJ Fat Tony's perspective becomes interesting. Positioned right beside the stage, he had one of the clearest views in the entire venue. From where he stood, he could see facial expressions the crowd couldn't. Body language the cameras didn't capture. Reactions that lasted only seconds but said a lot without words. He later hinted that what he saw that night wasn't just an awkward dance, it was discomfort that was hard to ignore. And when someone who witnessed the moment up close suggests that the situation felt deeper than it appeared, people start listening differently. Because suddenly, this isn't gossip. It's eyewitness memory. And when eyewitness memory lines up with later public tension, the story stops feeling random and starts feeling like a pattern that was hiding in plain sight. That's why this wedding dance refuses to fade into the background like most celebrity wedding stories do. Instead, it's being replayed, rediscussed, and reinterpreted as the possible turning point. The moment where private tension quietly surfaced in front of a room full of people who didn't realize they were watching history unfold. What looked like a brief, strange interruption may have been something far more revealing. Not because of what was said, but because of what was felt in the room. What makes this situation even more intriguing is what happened after the music stopped and the night moved on. Because for most weddings, once a slightly awkward moment passes, everyone forgets it. The laughter comes back. The celebration continues. And by the next morning, it's just a funny memory. But that's not what people say happened here. Several guests later recalled that the energy in the room never fully returned to what it was before the dance. Something had shifted. Conversations became quieter. People started speaking in low tones. Some guests even stepped outside to process what they had just seen, trying to figure out why the moment felt so uncomfortable without being able to clearly explain it. It was the kind of tension you feel without anyone announcing it. And Nicola's reaction didn't go unnoticed either. According to attendees, she didn't rush to the stage. She didn't laugh it off. She didn't try to turn it into a light-hearted moment. Instead, she appeared frozen for a few seconds, unsure of how to step back into what was supposed to be her first dance as a bride. Those few seconds are what people remember most. Because weddings are emotional, joyful, carefully planned experiences. And when something disrupts that flow, it stands out in people's minds far more than anyone expects. In the days after the ceremony, there was no public drama. No interviews. No statements. Everything looked normal from the outside. But behind the scenes, observers noticed something subtle. Brooklyn and Nicholas seemed to pull back. They weren't as present. They weren't as visible in family settings. Appearances together became rare. Social media interactions slowed down. And interviews that once felt relaxed became carefully worded and brief. It wasn't loud distance. It was quiet separation. That's what made people start connecting dots. Because when you look at the timeline, the dress situation, reported tension before the wedding, the dance moment, and then the noticeable distance afterward, it begins to look less like isolated events and more like chapters of the same story. And then came Brooklyn's public statement. Suddenly, the dance wasn't just an odd memory anymore. It became a reference point, a symbol people could attach to his claims about feeling uncomfortable, pressured, and emotionally strained during that period of his life. That's when online discussion exploded. Clips, guest comments, and old wedding footage started circulating again. People who had attended began sharing what they remembered. Not in dramatic terms, but in reflective ones, saying things like, "It did feel strange," or "You could tell something was off." DJ Fat Tony's earlier remarks gained new attention too. What once sounded like a passing comment about an awkward moment was now being replayed as a key eyewitness perspective. And here's where things get even more interesting. None of these reactions alone prove anything dramatic happened. But together, they create a picture that feels layered, emotional, and hard to ignore. Because sometimes, the biggest stories aren't about what was loudly said. They're about what everyone quietly felt but didn't understand until much later. The wedding dance became that kind of moment. A memory that didn't make sense at the time, but started to make sense after everything that followed. And that's why people are still talking about it. Not because it was scandalous on the surface, but because it may have been the first visible crack in a family image that had always looked perfectly controlled from the outside. And as the weeks turned into months, that wedding memory refused to fade the way most celebrity moments do. Instead, it lingered. It lingered in interviews that felt carefully worded, in family photos where certain faces were suddenly missing, in public appearances that looked polite, but distant, and in the way Brooklyn and Nicola began building a life that seemed intentionally separate from the Beckham spotlight. To casual observers, it looked like nothing more than a young couple carving their own path. But to those who remembered the wedding night clearly, it felt like the continuation of something that had quietly started there. Because distance doesn't usually appear overnight. It grows from moments. Moments that feel small at the time, but heavy in memory. And the more Brooklyn shared his feelings publicly, the more that night started to feel like a reference point people could finally understand. Not as gossip, not as drama, but as a moment that symbolized emotional discomfort no one had language for back then. People began revisiting everything with fresh eyes. The dress change before the wedding, the subtle tension guests say they sensed during the ceremony, the unusual energy during the reception, and the noticeable shift in how often Brooklyn appeared alongside his family afterward. Individually, none of it seemed explosive. Together, it started to look like a pattern. That's what turned this from a wedding anecdote into an ongoing conversation. Because when a single memory connects so many dots in hindsight, it stops feeling random. It starts feeling meaningful. DJ Fat Tony's position near the stage, Nicola's hesitation, Brooklyn's expression, the quiet confusion in the room. These details, once forgettable, now feel like pieces of a puzzle people didn't realize they were watching being assembled. And perhaps the most striking part of all this is how little was said publicly at the time. No arguments, no headlines, no dramatic fallout, just silence. But sometimes, silence carries more weight than noise. It suggests people are choosing not to say what they are feeling, choosing to move carefully, choosing distance instead of confrontation. That's what makes this story so compelling even now. Because it's not built on shouting or spectacle. It's built on observation, memory, and the slow realization that something important may have been revealed in a very brief, very human moment. A dance that didn't go as planned. A room that didn't feel the same afterward. A couple that quietly stepped back from the family center stage. And a perspective from someone who witnessed it up close, reminding people that what looks small in the moment can feel very different in retrospect. So when people ask why this wedding dance is still being discussed, the answer isn't because it was outrageous. It's because it may have been revealing. Revealing of emotions that weren't spoken. Revealing of tension that wasn't addressed. Revealing of a shift that only became clear with time. And that's why, years later, this moment still sits at the center of a story that continues to unfold, not as a scandal, but as a symbol of how quickly a carefully planned night can expose feelings no one intended to put on display. If this story made you pause, if it made you replay that wedding moment in your mind, then you're not alone. Because sometimes the most talked about celebrity moments aren't the loudest ones. They are the quiet seconds that didn't make sense at the time, but start to mean something later. And that's exactly why people are still discussing this today. Not because of headlines, not because of rumors, but because of how that moment felt to the people who were actually in the room. So now the question shifts to you. Do you think that wedding dance was just an awkward family moment that got overanalyzed later? Or do you believe it revealed tension that had been building long before anyone outside the family noticed? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read everything, and your perspective might be featured in the next video as this story continues to unfold. If you enjoy deep dives like this, where we'll look past the polished images and revisit moments from a different angle, make sure you hit that like button. It tells YouTube you want more content that questions what everyone else ignores. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. Because this isn't the only celebrity story where a single moment may have exposed something much bigger behind the scenes. More breakdowns, more timelines, and more hidden details are coming your way. Until then, keep watching closely. Because in the world of celebrity, the smallest moments often carry the biggest stories.